to kick it off, let's talk about that seasonal anime burnout. When I brought this up, or I thought of this, I was thinking of like, kind of like watching anime every season, like keeping up with every season. It's just more and more anime. Now that it's kind of picking back up, it's like 50 new animes every season. Do you ever feel like it's just at some point it starts to become like a chore, to kind of, you're suddenly the new season came, you're kind of behind, you're still finishing or binging kind of like what just ended the last season. Like, how do you feel about it, Sha?
I think it's kind of inevitable that I think you get burnt out on it if you follow a bunch of them at once. And I think it's also like, it depends on how many you're watching, but it's also that idea that you have to keep up with every seasonal and then kind of follow up on them if you want to be like in the conversation. That gets really tiring after a while. Yeah. But it is like there's two sides of it, because I was like looking back at some of the old podcasts I did on like our anime podcast, where I would be like on 3 out of 4 seasonal podcasts every year. So I'd be keeping up with it. That was back in like the 2016, 2018 time. And there are like some really kind of like fun elements to following that many series, because you always get the standout shows of the season that people will remember years down the line, but you do have some shows that are really kind of perfect as seasonals, and you watch them during that season and then you never think about them ever again. Like, you won't recommend them, you won't really think about them, but like for following those weekly for like a couple months, those were a lot of fun.
Yeah, I get that feeling, because I feel like with seasonal anime, sometimes because, you want to watch something, especially consistently, to have something nice to watch every week, you kind of lower your standards a little bit. You're kind of like, normally, if this show is finished, you come in with higher expectations, but because new seasons are a toss up, you're like, okay, as long as it meets this minimum criteria of interesting, or as long as it's fun, because I want something every week, that's kind of like what you'll settle for. But do you have any examples, maybe top of mind, of one that like you really enjoyed during that season, and then afterward you're like, okay, whatever, you don't even talk about it?
My go-to pick for that was back in, I think it was still 2016. It was Kisniver, that Trigger series that we love the opening for, that we talked about in the OP video. If you haven't seen that, check out our OP video talking about openings. That one was really cool watching weekly, because it was also an original. So no one had any idea how it would turn out. There were no source readers, no spoilers. It was all just theories. And it was a really quirky romance drama about, a bunch of teenagers are, part of an experiment where they can feel each other's feelings. So like, if someone's going through heartbreak, everyone feels it. Like, no one could really hide their emotions. And they had some kind of complicated, backstory with how they were all related to each other in different ways. And it was kind of like, I don't know, the Mario Okada like melodrama that you see in a lot of series mixed with the Trigger over the topness and unique character designs. And they came together in a really cool way. And it was a really cool experience just to see how it all played out. Would I recommend it to people now? Possibly, but in very niche capacities. I'm not going to be like, hey, 2016, the best show I saw, Kisniver. I'm going to recommend something else. But following it weekly was a really fun time, because you had no idea what would happen, and it was just a ton of fun to watch that every other week. Well,
I think that's the case with a lot of anime originals, just not knowing what's going to happen and not having anyone being able to tell you, well, this happens in the manga, or this falls off later in the manga, or just, kind of not spoiling, but at least kind of giving you an indication of where it's going to go, because it's such a toss-up. That makes it fun. But then when it's all said and done, it's like, okay. But also, I feel like you can recommend that anime in the capacity of like, okay, there's an anime that did that, that did this concept. So if you're looking for this specific concept, here it is, this exists. But besides that, I mean, I thought it was fun. I feel like the anime, like it was an experiment. I felt like that was an experiment for Trigger. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Like, and I felt like in some ways that was kind of like a base template for Darling in the Franxx.
Oh fuck! Like I can't believe you've done this.
The slice of life, the connecting part, the slice of life part.
When you think about it, maybe it shouldn't have existed in the first place. But
wow, that's a lot of hate right there.
A lot of hate. What's the one of like, it's the Jake Paul meme where he was watching like a Cody Co video. He's like, I don't know how someone could have that much hate in their heart. That's like me every time talking about shows I don't like.
Yeah. Cool Dinger in the chat, or Coolager, said, watching an anime with a mindset I want to watch this is much better than watching an anime with the mindset, I have to watch this. Well,
110%.
I feel like, when is that the case of I have to watch this? Only like, I guess when you want to keep up with the hype, like something's like popular, or when it's a sequel. Maybe.
Yeah, and I think also when you, I don't know, when that's the thing, that's like a big complex I have is like, I never want to watch a show where it feels like a chore, because then I know it's not going to be as enjoyable. Like, I don't want to put that pressure on myself. I want to be like spontaneously come to the idea that I want to watch something. And as long as I'm curious about something, I'm going to watch it. But that's why, like, when a lot of people are like, you need to watch One Piece. Why are you consuming anything but One Piece right now? Like, One Piece is going to be the best thing you're ever going to see. And I'm like, well, if you guys are telling me to do it, I don't want to do it. I have to come on my own terms to be like, I want to watch One Piece or read One Piece. So
I'm actually like the opposite. I'm very susceptible to that. Like, if friends like tell me like, bro, you got to watch this, it's so good. And I kind of know my friends. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll check it out. But then, you know, if it doesn't live up to it, I'll give them shit for it. But usually it does. It's like, okay.
That's a healthy thing.
I don't get around to it quickly, but maybe after enough time of them telling me and, you know, watch it. It depends. But I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
In terms of, I'm trying to see in the chat, it says, Tommy Police says, finding diamonds in the rough while they're airing is a great experience, like Odd Taxi. But if it starts feeling like a chore, especially as a fellow anime podcaster, it's better to take a step back.
Yeah. And that's why I haven't been on the seasonal impressions for my other podcast as much, because I would be like in the weeds watching like all of these shows. Like, and then I would be like, no, I don't want to watch that other show that's obviously going to be shitty, but I should watch for the sake of it, you know?
Yeah. Now, when a new season starts, do you find yourself like, can you ever go a new season, like let's say this new season or maybe next season, like not watching anything, like just like not watching anything at all?
I think I'll always watch at least one show from the season, especially if enough people talk about it. That sparks my curiosity and FOMO. And then I'm like, well, I got to see what's going on. Who knows if I end up finishing it, but I will start it.
Because part of it, I think, is a big part of it is that social aspect, just kind of knowing, hey, what's kind of happening in the community, just being involved, sort of just being, seeing the reactions.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you get like, at least what I've seen, like a lot of disappointments. Because then if there's like, let's say an anime that starts off like really, really strong, which happened this year, and it's an original, and like people are already like predicting like this is gonna be the anime of the year, it's gonna be amazing, like nothing can top this, and then like somewhere in the back of my head I'm thinking we've been burned before. This could possibly be one of those like it's gonna drop the ball later, but no one can like predict that at the moment, and then when it does, it's like, oh, you know, like it's like there's so much disappointment.
Well, I had that happen many times with, I remember the OG big anime disappointment for me was when I started watching consistently in 2016, and we had Erased, which came right after One Punch Man. And after One Punch Man dropped in winter of 2015, everyone was kind of looking for that next big thing to carry them over because it got so many people into the community. And Erased was looking to be that next big thing that had a lot of like mainstream appeal. It was like very intense. And for the first 10 episodes, everyone was like, fully on board with the show, and then it kind of tapered off in the last 3 episodes because people found it disappointing, whatever. And that was kind of considered like it was easy, like anime of the year contender, and then it broke apart. So ever since experiencing that kind of combustion weekly, I've been a lot more I've been a lot more reserved and like cautious when it comes to shows that people get hyped up for anime of the year. So when that happened with Wonder Egg Priority, the first episode dropped and people were like, this is going to be a 10. And I was like, nope. We've been there before. You can't say that this is going to be the best thing of the year based on 1 or 2 or even 3 episodes. You got to chill out, take a backseat, and wait and see how it turns out.
It's hard to call it that early.
Yeah. And people disappoint themselves because they get really hyped up. And not just for like a normal show. They want it to be the show. And when it doesn't turn out to be the show, then they're like, okay, this was terrible. And it's like, realistically, I'm not talking about Wonder Egg because I didn't finish it. Yeah. But realistically,
I can vouch for that.
You can, yeah. And maybe Wonder Egg is a bit different, but I think with Erased, what ended up happening is like, because it wasn't a 10, it was almost like a 1 for some people. And realistically, it's like somewhere in the middle.
I mean, I enjoyed Erased. I didn't even know it was so like hated, or I don't know, like people were as down on it until like recently, actually.
Oh, really?
Like I don't know. Like I do remember being a little disappointed by the ending. Like I think I think I jumped into the manga read the manga ending too, and like
I did too.
Yeah, and they were both kind of disappointing.
Yeah,
like not as great, but I didn't have like as many issues that like with people that unraveled so many like plot holes in the show and all these things that were up with it. I was like, it was a little disappointing, but that was kind of.
I think people had a good point because there are a lot of bad points to dislike Erased. I don't know if we've talked about it, but you see a lot of online points that are like, she didn't wait for him in the coma, therefore it's bad. Like those are those are really stupid reasons.
And I didn't have an issue with that.
Dumb.
Like,
but,
I mean, that stung, but I understood it.
Yeah.
At the time, I think.
Yeah, and like I think the people who had the point that it was predominantly a like character story about him and the girl and like him saving her from the abusive situation, that was a lot more compelling than the overall mystery, which ended up being kind of obvious. Once it switched into being more of the mystery aspect and not like him saving her, that's when it went downhill a bit because it wasn't as captivating or wasn't as compelling. I think that's a good reason compared to like my ship didn't sail or whatever.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I was interested in the mystery, but I could see, where just the maybe the mystery wasn't that strong from the beginning, and maybe the other thing was distracting from the mystery not being strong, and then it's like, oh, now it's center stage, and now it kind of falls apart.
Yeah, and I can see that like the shift in focus is a bit iffy, but either way, I don't think the ending diminished from the good episodes that came before it that much. Like. Yeah. It wasn't as good, but I don't think it was just like, I don't think it was awful. Would I recommend Erased today? Probably not. But when people look back on it and are like, oh, awful series, I'm like, not really. Most of it was fine.
It was your standard seasonal anime.
Yeah.
Going back to feeling like you at least should check out one thing, when a new season starts. So like, if you didn't watch anything at all, like in a new season, just completely didn't feel like watching anything.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you would still be an anime fan? Like what counts? Like if you're not watching anime regularly, I mean like when you've been doing the seasonal grind for like a few years, I think it's hard to say, oh, I didn't watch anime for a season, I'm not an anime fan. But like for people that purposely don't even keep up with seasonals, which, now boggles my mind. It's weird that it does now. Like when like, oh, you're not watching seasonals? But like, can you still be an anime fan or count as an anime fan if you just like, I don't know, watched a few anime a few years back? You're like, oh yeah, I like anime. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't really like gatekeeping what makes someone a fan. Besides the, like earlier in the week, people were saying, it was like Ninja and other like gamers were saying like the Chimera Ant arc was the worst arc in all of anime. I'll gatekeep them because it fits my agenda and that pisses me off. But in general, towards the like greater community, I don't like gatekeeping like as if you need to meet certain qualifications to be a fan. If you're saying like you like the medium, I'm like, dope, welcome aboard. But I think it's I think you get into the issue where some people, I don't know. I think it's tough because I don't have any issue with people who only watch older series. And I also don't completely have issues with people who don't watch newer series. But I do have an issue when people who are only watching one or the other speak about the other without having experienced it. Like if you're only watching 80s series and you're like new anime are terrible and they haven't consumed any of the newer anime that have come out in like the past 5 years, then I have an issue. But then if you're also a newer anime fan and you're like old anime look terrible and you haven't watched any of the older ones, then I also have an issue. It's kind of like recognize what you're consuming and speak on that. Don't try and overstep when you don't have that much experience with a certain time period, genre, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I do want to get to a few comments in the chat. One Piece is something you watch when you don't want the opposite of the Netflix scrolling problem. Fuck choices, just watch One Piece or work. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's good to have it on in the background. But then again, with subtitles, that's hard.
Yeah.
And then Roger Smith chimes in with, I usually wait for the season to end, and then I end up picking up stuff like Gekidol. Then I spend most of my other time watching these random old shows and OVAs.
Yeah. Goat moves.
Yeah, but like, what if they're like in your shoes where like most of the seasonal stuff you end up thinking, this 6 out of 10, nothing really outstanding. But what if they get that all the time, like every season, there's nothing really stand out for them. And then I guess, then is it fair for them to be like, I'm keeping up with seasonals, but there's nothing like the old stuff?
I think that's fair because I think you just have to give it a shot because the way the natural progression of the conversation goes is like, I don't like any of the new stuff. It's like, oh, what have you watched? And then if they're like nothing, you're like, okay, the conversation ends there because you haven't checked out these series that are considered good. If they're like, I don't like any of the new stuff, what have you watched? And then you list all the things that people would generally recommend and you still don't like them, then it's like, okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Because like I imagine the conversation going something like, okay, like it keeps getting older and older, but it's like nothing good has come out in the past 5 years. And then you're like, well, have you seen Rakugo? And then if they still say yes and I don't like it, it's like, okay, what's another good show that you could probably pick on that like a lot of people consider like standouts of the past 5 years? Like